submitting that this is a way, it takes some version of a transformative experience to reach past preaching to the choir. Our version of that was screenings. And this direct call to action for Invisible Children in this first tour 10 years ago was this event we called the Global Night Commute. So mimicking this phenomenon of kids night commuting, leaving their homes out of fear of abduction, we asked suburban white kids in this country to do that for one night. It was very scary for parents. We were asking, junior high, high school, college students to sleep in downtown city areas. In LA, it was in Santa Monica in front of the the city hall down here. But we're talking about like downtown Chicago, New York City, Dallas, Orlando. Actually, it ended up being over 100 places. But we asked, and kids responded. This is San Antonio. This is San Diego. This, I believe, is Portland. And April 25th, 2006, 128 locations, 80,000 participants. Again, out of curiosity, was any of you at one of these global night commutes? A few of you. Yeah. It was the moment, when you have your campaign and your project, again, we'd been working for like 2 years, but when you release it to the world and that first moment when people respond. This was our first time seeing that. And I remember that night, I actually was in the one in San Diego. You work so hard, you're exhausted. And then in San Diego, we had like 3,000 kids come. And I remember just sitting there that night crying, just so thankful that anyone, showed up and cared. But then as the story goes, the next day, it was like nothing happened. It was like, I don't know what we thought was going to happen. I think we thought that President Obama was going to call us and just say like, okay, what do you want us to do? He wasn't even the president back then. That would even be more amazing. President Obama with the time machine calls us and says, no, but we thought it was like somehow the war was just going to end. The problem was going to be solved. Peace talks were going to just spontaneously erupt because suburban kids slept in a park in San Diego. And it was like radically disillusioning to our naive activist spirit, which was just that awareness was enough, or that just mobilization or just getting someone to say I care is enough. Unfortunately, that is never enough when you want results right there in the short term. So that led us to, and you're going to see the screen now a handful of times, our operating principles. Number one, our language, define the impossible win and show exactly how to get there every 6 months. So no longer were we going to say, the goal for tonight is to end the war with the LRA. We were going to say the goal for this evening is to specifically fill in the blank, right? And for that next campaign, specifically, the goal was government support of the LRA peace talks. Again, we don't have time to go through like the whole history of the conflict, but just suffice it to say, there was an environment in which peace talks were possible, and our goal now was for the U.S. government to deploy a senior official to be a part of those. Okay, so we basically did the whole thing over again. This is 1 year later when we did a whole different overnight sleep out event. This one we utilized this really cool tactic of blow up jumbo screens. And so at night, while kids were sleeping out in these parks, we actually played short videos connecting about people's lives that were kind of stuck in the conflict. It was really cool. It was like activism matches like education. Like think like right now, if there was like a social campaign around like the refugee crisis, the fact that millions of people are fleeing horrific violence in Syria, and that we brand these people as refugees. We don't say people fleeing violence, we say refugees. That's their identity. Imagine if we had an event in which you were showing solidarity, but then also learning about what does it mean to be a refugee? What does it mean to like live in a war zone and hope that you have entrance to another country? That's what we did this night. It was really cool. And then we learned after the disillusionment of the first time, we got to meet some people that can help us connect this energy to policy change. We got to meet some people that can help us connect this awareness to results. Again, that's a role that you guys at Creative Visions can play, and you personally, is connecting good-hearted creatives that are creating the energy to the policy thinkers. Language here, know people who know what you don't know. And for us, that was these guys, this is a screenshot, but of an event that we did right after this big event with policy partners. So it was Invisible Children. This was huge, meeting and engaging then with, you don't know their names, but I'll say them anyway. Michael Poffenberger from Resolve, and then John Prendergast with Enough, two firms that work in DC that know the ins and outs of policy that helped us know how we can translate thousands of kids sleeping in parks to something being done, right? This event, we actually used the celebrity support of this gentleman, Ryan Gosling. He wasn't a part of the physical, he was not a spokesperson for the event. He was like, that's a bad analogy. Let me put it this way. I learned from being a part of these meetings how much people in DC worship celebrities, because this guy, it was like moth to a flame. When Ryan Gosling was walking around the halls of Congress, it was like every office wanted to meet with us. And so we did this tour where we brought photos and videos from that event with a celebrity. Betty, the woman, this woman here was a part of the peace process. And we started meeting with members of Congress and meeting with members of Congress. And eventually, only about a month later, we got this guy actually appointed, Tim Shortley, U.S. State Department official. And we made it seem like getting this guy appointed was like the biggest deal in history to our supporters. You know, it was like the first time that their work, that their activism led to a policy outcome. Something specifically changed because of their work. And that idea of connecting the intentions, you know, connecting that positive spirit to something specific, you will see now throughout the rest of this presentation is something that we try to do over and over and over because it's motivating. Like, people want to know my effort did something, and we're like, it got Tim Shortley appointed. So check out how we use that story. So then a couple months later, amazingly, you know, the headline here, if you can't see it in the back, is Uganda and LRA rebels signed permanent ceasefire agreement in Juba. They actually did it. And we were there to film it, and check this out. This is a photo of, I took some screenshots of them like shaking on the final agreement, and you can see right over here in the corner, this is our guy, Tim Shortley, like popping his head into this frame. And, you know, we were like, we did it. You know, people sleeping in parks, got this guy appointed, helped broker a peace deal for Africa's longest running conflict. And like 3 years in, we're like, we're done. It was, what if I just stopped right there? Like, so it all worked. It'd be a different presentation than you were expecting. Yeah, you expect it because this is 2009, it didn't work. And unfortunately, despite the fact that there was a ceasefire agreement, we're seeing this right now in Syria. You know, what was it, a couple weeks ago, they signed a ceasefire, you know, and then there's a lot of skepticism that it's going to hold. It probably won't, same thing. Coney walked away from the ceasefire. That gave, this was the end of the Bush administration. The Bush administration then supported a military assault on the LRA. The LRA basically then responded with some of their worst massacres in history. 400 people killed on Christmas. They locked people in churches and burned them down. Retaliation basically for U.S. involvement in meddling with their effort. This was the ultimate low point. You know, this was us now 4 years in saying, not only did our plan not work, but arguably made it worse. You know, arguably made it worse. And led us individually, like on our own personal journey, to this question of like, are we in? Are we going to keep doing this? And I remember this is like 2009, and myself and Jason and Laren, you know, looked each other in the eye and said, yeah, we're in. You know, we've learned a lot. We're not going to do that same, you know, we're not going to make the same mistake twice. But we're in this thing. And we kind of kept going. And pretty shortly after that, we met this gentleman. For those who don't know him, he's the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the chief prosecutor and the founding prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who, of all of the international criminals in the world that fit his jurisdiction, he indicted Joseph Kony first. And we met him, and this is an interesting side note. The reason we got access to this guy, again, this is 2009, no one knew of Invisible Children. Our network sucked, right? We didn't have any friends in high places. But we were filmmakers, and we asked him if we could interview him. And this is an interesting tactic of like just campaigning. People a lot of times won't take your meeting if you just say, can we meet, can we talk? But if you ask to interview them, they'll say sure. It's very strange. It's either ask to interview them or ask if they will accept an award. And they usually say yes. And so Bobby, thankfully, drove himself out to The Hague in the Netherlands and interviewed Campo, and he helped us he took some of the naive glasses off of our head, and he helped us really see the idea of like an international justice framework for our advocacy. Again, us learning going from just like the naive moral outrage of this is wrong, we need to stop it, to, well, we live in a world with rules and laws, and our language needs to like imply that. And so from there on out, the goal for this next campaign was an international commitment to arrest Joseph Kony. That is within international law because he's indicted by the International Criminal Court. And this is something that we could like sing from high places all over the world. That the world has theoretically agreed to this, but they're just not doing it. Right? They're just not doing it. Enforcement is something we've already agreed to. And so we did what we do best, which is, again, we sent out the roadies, we did the screenings. You don't see that because I don't go through it every time, but just think anytime anyone's doing something, the only reason they're doing it is because we had teams of roadies doing hundreds of screenings just like this to rooms that are 20 people, 50 people, 300 people that then end the film and say, join us. If you're in, join us. And we did these very visual, very symbolic, large events. This one's called The Rescue. This is 2009. This is New York City. This is Santa Monica, just down the road. This is London. This is the first time we did it in other countries. This is Sydney. And we skipped New Zealand to land right on a bill, a piece of legislation. Now, 5 years into our campaigning, 1 year of doing this rescue event, and Congress got serious this time. And a bipartisan piece of legislation was introduced, and we got after it. One more year of campaigning, and we had kind of our second mountaintop experience being in the Oval Office with President Obama when he signed this bill into law.